Imagine being humiliated by an arrogant superior, only to discover that they are the CEO of the company. How do you react when the injustice comes from the least expected person? Alicia faces this dilemma, fighting for respect and justice in a toxic environment. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment on what you think of this story. I never imagined that simply being called to a performance meeting would be the beginning of everything. The area manager came regularly, but it never seemed as important as it did that time. As the supervisor of the Eclipse department store, the routine of managing a team was already well established, and I felt secure in my position. But that day, something told me that the visit from the regional auditor would bring something unexpected. The meeting was scheduled for the afternoon. When I arrived at the office, I saw my colleagues preparing for the meeting. The anticipation in the air was almost palpable, but no one knew much about who exactly was coming. I went to the HR room, where the atmosphere was tenser than I expected. "You'll see, this Monroe guy has a reputation for being tough," said Paula, one of the assistants. I never let office gossip get to me, but this time, something in the way she said it made me think it could be something bigger. I took a deep breath. I knew what was at stake. After all, good performance in the store meant not only bonuses but also a real opportunity for growth. The chance to prove my competence. I had never been too caught up in the office politics, but this moment felt different. When the man walked through the door, the atmosphere suddenly became heavier. Howard Monroe, the so-called auditor, was not what I expected. His stiff posture and impassive expression made me realize in an instant that he wasn't just a difficult person, but someone with an immense presence. He was accompanied by an assistant, but his eyes were fixed on me from the moment he entered. "Are you the supervisor?" The question was direct, with no greetings, no small talk. He didn't even glance at the documents on the desk, as if he had already decided what he thought. "Yes, it's me, Alicia Carter," I said, trying to stay calm. I knew that a simple hello wouldn't do the job, so I preferred to be direct. He sized me up for a moment. His eyes scanned me from head to toe, a crooked smile forming as he observed me as though he were deciding something. I didn't know if I was being evaluated or if he was just enjoying my reaction. Deep down, I knew it would be just another one of those meetings where pressure was used as a form of manipulation. "Interesting," he murmured, picking up a folder and opening it, reading something that appeared to be the store's history. "Let's see what you really do here." The feeling in the room shifted at that instant. He wasn't just evaluating me, he was looking for flaws, mistakes. His tone made me feel almost like a rookie, as if I had something to prove all the time. It wasn't the first time I'd faced looks like that, but something about this situation bothered me more than usual. There was an air of excessive superiority, something arrogant that didn't leave room for dialogue. "You're responsible for diversity here, right?" he asked with disdain. He was referring to the inclusion program I had implemented in the store, aiming to create a more welcoming work environment for everyone. Something I believed was crucial for greater productivity and well-being within the team. I knew I needed to defend my ideas. "Yes, I am. And I believe it's essential that everyone feels comfortable at work, not just in terms of performance but also in the environment they're in." He didn't seem interested. He grimaced as if trying to digest something bitter. "Well, in my experience, this has never produced real results. People should focus on work, not on other distractions," he said, his tone even more cutting. That statement caught me off guard. I had expected constructive criticism, suggestions for improvement, even reasonable questions about how diversity was being handled. But no. He was attacking me, undermining my management in a disrespectful way. I could almost feel the frustration rising in my chest. It wasn't just a professional challenge, it was personal. "I understand you have your opinion, but this isn't just a matter of morality. There are studies that prove diversity leads to more innovation, better performance, and greater employee satisfaction. It's not isolated," I tried to argue, striving to stay calm, but the lump in my throat kept growing. He ignored me for a second, glancing at his assistant, who seemed more concerned with the spreadsheet than with anything I was saying. That made me wonder, was he even listening to me? Then he turned back to me and, with no hint of empathy, said, "Do you think this is going to save your job?" The question was a punch disguised as words. Things were becoming more tense than I could have imagined. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, trying to control the words that wanted to escape my mouth. I wanted to scream, I wanted to explode, but I knew that wasn't the solution. If I wanted to secure my place in the company, I needed more than impulsive words. I needed to show him that I wasn't a victim. Let me show you what the store has achieved in terms of results. Diversity isn't just a goal, it's a commitment to excellence. If you give it a chance to see the numbers, you'll understand the positive impact of it, I said, my voice now more firm. But the feeling that I was fighting a lonely battle continued to consume me inside. He looked at me as if testing me before turning and leaving without a word. The assistant just gave me a brief glance, perhaps feeling uncomfortable with the situation, but soon followed the boss. I stood there, alone, with a mix of indignation and growing fear about what this would mean. What I didn't know yet was that this meeting would be the beginning of a true battle for respect and the chance to show who I really was. The following days were a mix of frustration and tension. Howard Monroe had left, but his words kept echoing in my head, like an echo that wouldn't stop. When he left the room, it was as if all the weight he had imposed on me hung in the air, invisible but absolutely heavy. The meeting was only the beginning, I knew that. However, the response from HR was what really made me question everything. After Monroe left, I requested a meeting with the Human Resources Department to discuss the situation. I felt that the attack on my management couldn't be ignored. Their response? An attempt to minimize what had happened. Look, Alicia, we understand the situation, but you know how it is, he's new here and he was just positioning himself. We can't act without more evidence, you understand, right? Said Sylvia, the HR manager. She seemed genuinely concerned, but her tone was immersed in an excuse I wasn't willing to accept. I can't believe you're defending behavior like that. He disqualified me in front of everyone, made comments that don't make sense. This isn't just positioning himself, Sylvia. He attacked me and I won't let that slide. My voice sounded firmer than I felt, but I had to maintain that stance. Sylvia leaned back in her chair, averting her eyes to the laptop. She was clearly uncomfortable. I understand your frustration, Alicia, but what you need to remember is that the Monroe effect carries a lot of weight here. Yes? Well, he's one of the main investors now. So, there's an unwritten policy to keep a certain distance. That's when I lost my patience. Oh, of course. And how does that justify the way I'm being treated? How does that justify the way he humiliated me? How does that contribute to our teamwork? Because the Monroe effect seems more focused on destruction than on creating a healthy environment. My frustration was palpable, but what hurt the most was realizing they weren't willing to stand up for what was right. I left there with a feeling of helplessness mixed with anger. It wasn't just his behavior that hurt me, but the fact that no one was really willing to support me. Alone, at that moment, it felt like I would have to fight the entire system if I wanted to earn the respect I deserved. And I was ready to do that. In the following days, the pressure mounted. Howard Monroe didn't show up anymore, but tensions within the store increased. Some coworkers started asking me what had happened, and although I tried to be professional, I couldn't completely hide the emotional impact I was feeling. He's not going to bring me down, I repeated mentally every morning before starting my shift. But at night, alone, I wondered, what if he already did? That's when I realized something important. I couldn't keep reacting alone. I needed allies. Maybe it wasn't possible to turn the situation around immediately, but if I had data, testimonies, and a more solid strategy, maybe I could change the dynamic. I couldn't wait for someone else to do it for me. That's when I decided I would look for evidence. I knew the diversity program was working. There were numbers and proof that employees were happier and more productive since the work environment had been improved to be more inclusive. I knew that if HR wasn't willing to act, then I would do my part. I reached out to Lisa, one of the newer assistants, who had also shown a lot of empathy for the diversity cause. She was always willing to help, and although she was younger and still adjusting to the corporate dynamic, I knew I could count on her. We talked over an informal lunch about what could be done. Lisa, we need to collect data on the impact of diversity in the store. I know this will work, but I can't do it alone. HR has already made it clear they won't support me, so I need to show with numbers that we're on the right path. She looked at me with a smile of understanding. You can count on me, Alicia. I'll help organize the information and talk to some of the other team members who have also benefited from the changes. It's going to be hard, but if anyone can do this, it's you. Those words meant much more than she could imagine. I was no longer alone. Lisa wasn't just an assistant. She was there by my side, ready to help me reverse the course of events. Together, we began working on collecting evidence, gathering testimonies, and, most importantly, gathering the data that would show the real impact of the diversity program. Meanwhile, Monroe's behavior seemed more arrogant and disrespectful. He wasn't just distorting my actions anymore. He was positioning himself as someone who knew more than everyone else, and with every encounter with him, I felt more challenged. But instead of intimidating me, it motivated me to keep going. He didn't know who he was messing with. With each new team meeting, with every conversation with colleagues, the tension in the air became more evident. It felt like the days were growing heavier, and with each new interaction with Howard Monroe, the sense that he was becoming more detached from reality increased. I needed to act. Not just for myself, but for the entire team that was being affected by his words and actions. I knew I was preparing for something bigger. Something that could transform my professional life forever. But the question still lingered in my mind. Could I really change something? The days were dragging on, and every time I faced Howard Monroe's gaze or heard his insensitive words, something inside me grew stronger. The pressure wasn't breaking me, it was shaping me. I couldn't keep living with the feeling that he had the power to ruin my career just because of his cruel and superior behavior. I was determined to act, even without institutional support. Then, 2 mornings later, as I walked into the store for another day of work, something unusual happened. "Hey Alicia, do you have 5 minutes?" asked Monroe's assistant, Samuel, in a tone I had never heard before, almost pleading. I furrowed my brow, suspicious. Samuel had always been a nice guy, but his behavior was a little more nervous than usual. He was clearly uncomfortable. "Sure," I replied, heading to the break room where he had called me. When I entered the room, Samuel closed the door behind me with a serious expression. "I don't know how to say this, but you need to know. Monroe isn't just the regional manager. He's the CEO of Eclipse." My legs wobbled for a second. Those words hit me like an unbearable weight. The CEO? I had heard rumors that he was an important investor, but I never imagined he was the real person in charge of the entire operation of the company. The man who had attacked me, who disqualified me so coldly and calculatedly, was none other than the head of everyone. The top of the hierarchy. How can he be the CEO? Is this the guy I've been dealing with? The surprise, mixed with disbelief, made my voice falter. "You're telling me that this man has the power to bring me down and no one even warned me?" Samuel hesitated before answering, as if he knew I didn't want to hear it. "Yes. And not only that, he has complete control over everything that happens here, from internal policy decisions to the investments the company makes. No one knows, but he's the one who holds the store's operation together." That revelation hit me hard. Every moment I spent trying to protect my team, every effort I made to build an inclusive and strong culture, now seemed like a battle in a minefield. Everything I had done to improve the work environment seemed insignificant in the face of the power Monroe held. But at the same time, something inside me started to form. I didn't know exactly what this meant for my future, but I knew I couldn't stop now. If I was willing to fight him, the truth Samuel had just revealed only strengthened my determination. The CEO wouldn't be able to destroy me. Not if I could prove that what I was doing was, in fact, what the company needed to thrive. "I need more information, Samuel. Do you have anything I can use? Anything that can help me prioritize diversity and inclusion within the company?" I stared at him, already thinking about how I could use this to my advantage. Even if he was the CEO, if I could prove the value of my vision, maybe there was still a chance. Samuel looked around as if making sure no one was listening, and then moved a little closer. "It's more complicated than you think, Alicia. What you're trying to do isn't something Monroe approves of. And he has a way of manipulating things behind the curtains. But I know a way, something that can help you put the pieces together." He seemed genuinely concerned. "Tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. If there's something I can use against him, I want to know." I couldn't waste any more time. I was on a mission. Samuel hesitated once more but then spoke. Monroe has an exclusive contract with some suppliers, Alicia. They've been long-term partners with Eclipse, and he gets a significant percentage of those deals. I can't prove it, but if you could look at the contract transactions and expose this, you could maybe get some support from the board. I stood there, silent, absorbing what he had just said. The fact that Monroe wasn't just arrogant and cruel, but also someone who was apparently manipulating the company for his personal benefit, left me speechless for a moment. This changed everything. He wasn't just attacking an employee or disrespecting diversity, he was jeopardizing the values the company claimed to uphold. What you're telling me is that he's using Eclipse for personal gain? That he's manipulating contracts to benefit himself? I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. Yes, exactly. I can't confirm everything, but I know enough to help you. If you can find the right contracts, you can expose what he's doing, and that might bring down the empire he's built here. The conversation left me with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. If I wanted to continue my mission of protecting my team and the culture I was trying to build, I needed to take an even bigger step. Now, my goal wasn't just to fight Monroe, it was to expose him for who he really was. When Samuel left the room, I let his words resonate in my mind. I had a choice to make: continue the fight against a man who seemed invincible, or use the information I had just uncovered to turn the tables. But in any scenario, one thing was certain: I wouldn't let myself be silenced. My next move would be crucial. Now, more than ever, I was ready to face the man behind the mask, not just to protect my career, but to fight for the justice I knew this company needed. I spent the following days immersed in a mix of caution and tension, but also in a growing drive. Samuel's revelation about Monroe's absolute power as CEO was the final push I needed to realize that the fight was no longer just about what he had done to me, but about something much bigger. It was about exposing the flaws and injustices he was perpetuating within the company. I could no longer rely solely on good intentions. HR would do nothing, and the idea that an inclusive culture could thrive within such a corrupt system seemed increasingly distant. But what motivated me now was the certainty that, by uncovering and exposing Monroe's manipulations, I could finally turn things around, not just for me, but for everyone who was being harmed by his authoritarian behavior. The first thing I did was dive into research. Samuel had given me a starting point with the supplier contracts, but I needed concrete proof. My first stop was the company's filing system, a platform where all contract-related documents were stored. As a sales manager, I had access, but I had to be careful. I couldn't raise suspicions or draw attention to the fact that I was investigating the CEO himself. At first, my work was discreet. I sifted through the system, searching for any mention of Monroe and his supposed side businesses. Hours passed quickly as I checked and cross-referenced information. I knew that if I found something substantial, I could use it as a powerful weapon, not only against Monroe but against the system he had created within the company. It was during one of those late nights in the office that I found what I was looking for. In one of the oldest contracts, which involved a series of investments in startups Monroe was trying to promote, I noticed something odd. He had included clauses that favored a select group of suppliers in which he personally had stakes. The percentages were high, and the terms of the contract, besides being unfavorable to Eclipse, were clearly manipulated to benefit a network of businesses that Monroe secretly controlled. I felt a chill as I realized what I had in my hands. I had proof in some way. The clauses, hidden under layers of corporate jargon and technical terms, clearly showed that Monroe was using his position not only to attack employees like me, but also to enrich himself at the company's expense. The evidence was right there, tangible, and I knew I couldn't let this opportunity slip by. But it wouldn't be easy. One more piece was missing from my strategy. I needed an ally within the board, someone with enough influence for what I uncovered to actually have an impact. It couldn't just be an anonymous tip, it had to be a well-structured campaign. And for that, I would need someone who had the courage to help me. That's when I remembered Rachel, the finance director. She had always been reserved, but she had shown sensitivity and interest in the changes being implemented within the company. On several occasions, she had made comments about how the internal culture could be improved, and despite her position on the board, I knew she wasn't complicit with the Monroe effect mentality. I needed to talk to her to see if she was willing to ally with me in this fight. During a coffee break, I found a way to strike up a conversation with Rachel. The idea was to be subtle without immediately revealing what I knew. During one of the informal meetings, when everyone was distracted with the office routine, I gathered the courage to approach her. Rachel, I know you care about the direction the company has been taking recently. And well, I need someone who shares the same vision. Someone who wants Eclipse to truly thrive but in a fair way. She looked at me attentively, her expression serious, yet curious. Alicia, I see what's happening. I know you're trying to do the right thing, but it's a tough road. The company's culture, it seems to be getting lost. What do you need? That was all I needed to hear. I took a deep breath and carefully shared a softer version of the situation I was facing, mentioning the supplier contracts and the manipulation I had found. I know something is wrong here and we can't let it slide. I need your help to expose the truth, Rachel. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about what Monroe has been doing, using his personal power to undermine the integrity of our company. Rachel watched me for a few seconds as if evaluating the seriousness of my statement. Do you have proof, Alicia? My hand moved to my bag and I pulled out a copy of the documents I had found. I knew that from that moment, my professional life would take an even more unpredictable turn. Rachel took the papers with a careful glance, scanning the details I had highlighted. This is very serious, she said finally after a long silence. I didn't know how far he could go. But you're right. This needs to be exposed. We can't let him continue with this scheme. The sense of relief was almost immediate, but at the same time, a new weight settled on my shoulders. Now, whatever I did, it was out of my control. I had an ally, but Rachel was also putting everything at risk. From that moment on, my fight wasn't just against Monroe. It was against an entire system that might not care about the truth. Let's do this the right way, Rachel continued. We need to involve the board, get the lawyers involved. And I'll make sure they don't try to silence us. But this has to be well planned, Alicia. What you've uncovered won't go unnoticed. I knew this would be the pivotal moment. The battle was about to reach a new level, and this time I couldn't turn back. I couldn't hide in the shadows anymore. I was prepared to face the consequences, whatever the cost. I just didn't know how far Monroe would go to protect his secrets. The tension was in the air. Every step we took now was calculated. Rachel and I knew that by exposing Monroe, we weren't just confronting the power of one man, but challenging an entire corrupt system that had been entrenched in Eclipse for years. But the decision was made. I could no longer stand on the sidelines waiting for things to change on their own. I needed to seek justice not just for me but for everyone who had been crushed by his arrogance. In the following days we began to piece together our plan. Rachel was being careful, cautious about how to approach the board. We knew they were loyal to Monroe, but we had something crucial in hand. Clear evidence of his personal manipulation in the contracts. With this, it would be impossible to ignore what he had done. The question was, how would we present ourselves to the board? How would we prove that Monroe had been deceiving everyone? The plan was simple but risky. We would have a private meeting with the board, where we would present the evidence and ask for immediate action. I knew that if we didn't have the board's support, we would be crushed. Monroe wouldn't hesitate to fire us or worse, make our lives a living hell. But the truth was on our side and that gave me courage. The day of the meeting arrived. My heart was racing as I prepared to finally confront the man who had attacked and manipulated me for so long. It was now or never. When we entered the conference room, Monroe's gaze was immediately on me. He seemed calm as always, an imposing figure projecting power and control. But inside he was tense, I could tell. When the silence fell, Rachel began to speak. Alicia and I have brought some important information that we need to share with everyone. It concerns the handling of certain contracts that have been harmful to Eclipse. Rachel spoke with a calmness that hid the tension I felt inside. We are here to expose a serious conflict of interest involving the CEO of the company. The impact was immediate. Several board members shifted in their seats, exchanging looks of surprise and confusion. What was happening? It felt like I was in a nightmare, but the nightmare was real. I was about to ruin Monroe's life, But I also knew this was the only way to give Eclipse a chance to start over. Monroe stayed silent for a moment, but his eyes, usually cold and calculating, were now restless. He knew what was about to happen. I could feel the tension in his body. He was used to manipulating and controlling, but he never imagined someone would stand up against him. "You think you're going to take me down with this?" he said, his voice low and threatening. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Alicia. This company owes me everything. You think you're going to change that? Expose me and walk away unscathed? You don't know who you're messing with." His confidence didn't shake me. On the contrary, it only fueled my determination. He was used to being the center of attention, to controlling everything around him, but now he was being unmasked. He was the imposter, not me. Rachel continued with the same firmness. "You knew what you were doing, Monroe. These contracts aren't just harmful to Eclipse, they're fraudulent. And we have proof. There's no denying it now." I then stepped forward, my gaze fixed on Monroe. "You may be the CEO, but you're not above the law. People will know who you really are and what you've been doing here. What you did to me, what you did to all of us, will be exposed. I just wanted a fair work environment, and you forced me to fight for it." The room was in shock, but the decision was made. The meeting was no longer about how to handle Monroe's behavior. It was about what to do with the evidence we had just presented. The board could no longer ignore the evidence of corruption. Monroe, as I expected, reacted in the most venomous way possible. "You have no idea what you're causing, Alicia," he said, trying to maintain control, but the rage in his eyes couldn't be hidden. "I'm going to destroy you. You'll regret ever messing with someone like me." But even in the face of his threat, a sense of relief washed over me. I knew I had finally done the right thing. My fight wasn't just for my dignity, but for the good of all the employees who had been oppressed, silenced, or mistreated by someone who thought they were untouchable. The following weeks were intense. Monroe tried to fight back, but the truth, as always, was stronger. The pressure he exerted on the board was not enough to cover up the corruption that was now in plain sight. In an extraordinary meeting, he was removed from the position of CEO, and an internal investigation was launched. Eclipse would undergo a major restructuring, but something bigger was at stake. The company's culture was about to be transformed. With Monroe ousted, I could finally breathe. But more important than the relief from the fall of such a destructive man was the power of our struggle. I knew the change wouldn't be easy and that other challenges would arise, but I now had the certainty that it was possible to fight and win, even when it seemed like all was lost. The sense of justice wasn't just about defeating a corrupt man, but about knowing that by doing the right thing I could influence others to do the same. I had started fighting alone, but now I knew that the power was in our hands. We all have a voice, a strength that can move mountains, even when we are pressured by those who seem invincible. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but Eclipse was now on the right track. And I, Alicia, knew this wouldn't be the last time the fight for justice would go through me. I was ready for whatever came next, because now, more than ever, I believed in the power of the truth. And that was the first of many victories.